TechDrover, out here in wonderful Colorado. Wind's kicking up. Again, you might hear some wind noise. Innovation doesn't happen on a whiteboard. It happens when someone breaks the rules enough to make something great happen. So let's start talking about it. And think about, how does your company really innovate? Or is innovation just a buzzword that you put on PowerPoints and motivational posters in your company? Innovation means creating something new or adapting new technology, maybe even using existing technology in a totally different way. But it's got to serve the business needs. There's no point innovating just to innovate. It's got to have a purpose, and it's got to be focused on what you're trying to do. It's not about incremental new features. It's not about UI tweaks. It's real new capabilities that add value to your product and to your customers. It's going to keep your product relevant. It's going to keep your customers around unless they're some, captured audience because they have to use your insurance plan. It requires two things. You got to know your company's objectives, where they are now, where they want to go, so you can innovate to help them get there. But you also got to know the technology side. The business may not be aware there's technology out there that could help them deliver new value. So you got to bring that in, show them how it can be done. I once worked on a team. They were trying to innovate. They were pushing the shiny new security technology. Maybe they did a proof of concept before I got there. I don't know. They were trying to work it into their sprint production process. It wasn't ready. It wouldn't even do what they wanted it to do. But they kept pushing it. They worked on this for 2 years. How much money and time did they waste? That's money and time that could have been put towards something useful for their customers instead of spending it on that. So that's why when you're going to innovate, when you're going to do something new, you got to treat it like a mini business case. You got to do an upfront feasibility study. Is it going to do what we want? What's it going to cost? What are the risks? What are the projected values in revenue? And this has got to be some kind of combined team. Maybe you got some engineers and some business people. Very few cross that boundary. So you got to make it a team effort. It's not just about the technology. It's about technology that adds value for your business. And you got to do a real prototype. Don't just do a cheap proof of concept and say, yay, it works. No, you got to build a real prototype that shows value in real world scenarios, corner cases. You don't want to just jump in blindly because, we tested it, it sort of works. I read somewhere that 46% of companies that try to adopt AI and proof of concepts abandon them because it's a shiny new toy. We need to do AI. They don't really understand AI, what it's required to do that, how it's going to impact their business. They just think, we got to have it, everybody else is having it. Instead, do that mini business case. Let someone dig into it, figure it out. Do you have enough data? Are you going to work off LLM solutions already out there, which is going to be a cost? How are you going to deliver it? What's the value? Why are people going to care? If nothing else, remember that question. Always ask, why do people care? Here's a new feature. Why do people care? Kind of getting back to engineer versus developer. Best practices, production, that keeps the lights on, keeps the money flowing in. Doesn't spark breakthroughs. And then you look back in history, I'm sure there were best practices. Cavemen had them for how to hunt game, how to start fires. Farmers had them for plowing fields until they got tractors. Blacksmiths had them for horseshoes. Early car makers had them for car assembly. But none of that invented the wheel. None of that invented tractors. Innovation takes something new or takes something existing, makes it new, brings in technology, makes it much, much better. So the best practices you're following today, they might not be the best practices tomorrow. Someone who innovates may come up with a better way to do it. You can't go where you want to go. You don't know where you are. Worked for one company. They kept throwing all these buzzwords around. I actually told the CEO, you don't know where you're going to end up if you're constantly staring at your shoes one step at a time. You got to think ahead. AI might be a great solution. You got to understand why. The realities of it. You got to have data. If you're doing a custom solution, you got to have a bunch of data. If you're going to use an off-the-shelf LLM, you got to figure out how it's going to do it. and trust whatever was trained on is going to be helpful for your business. Once you identify technology, you really got to gauge the expected value, the risk. What is it going to take to build it and move it into production? But you got to keep doing it, because no product just sits on the shelf and makes money forever. If the potential and the budget's available, then start a search. But you got to have that budget. Again, got to think about it as a team. You got to jump in, do the research, figure it out. This is a great place for AI. Use some of those off-the-shelf tools. Use them to help do the research. It's a great way to start. Saves you from digging through websites trying to find things that are relevant. When you get to a point, it's not quite ready, it's not going to live up the hype, it's not going to provide the value you expect. You got to shelve it, move on. But don't delete it. It may come back at a later date. You can't innovate on a schedule. You're going to run into unexpected things. You're going to have to figure it out as you go. You're going to have to make adjustments. You can't really put that on a schedule. You got to understand the current issues, limitations. Here's a new technology. What does it do now? Where is it projected to go? Sometimes you start with something and you may shelve it. Let the technology mature a little more and pick it up later and then turn it into a product. Your innovation team, they got to guide the production team in working that new technology into production. You can't just throw it at them over the wall and say, hey, or good luck. No, you got to help them get it done. You got to support and assist them. Maybe you have to tweak the technology to fit in the production environment. There's something you weren't aware of, they have a better idea of how to interface with it. Get them involved. Make sure it's working. You got to have a flexible innovation process. You really need a separate team focused on innovation and working it into production. They're out of the day-to-day stuff. They need to be aware of what's going on, but it can't be their full-time job. So take those recommendations into account. Set up a separate team, some engineers, some business people, full-time, part-time. Follow a reasonable process. Do that mini business case. Make sure the risk, the costs, the benefits are going to be there. You don't want to jump into something, spend a bunch of money, and then have it go nowhere. So make sure it's going to provide the value. And if it's not, kill it. Don't let it linger on. So that's it for innovation. Next up, technology selection. TechDrover out. If you got ideas and need help wrangling your mess, hit me up. You can't roadmap a breakthrough, but you can clear the trail. Let it run.